Well, hey there, Pilgrim. What's going on? We're back. We're doing another FilmStruck Film Club. It is me. It's your host, Carson. And we're doing it. We watched another movie, so we made another video. You may notice we got a little bit of a baby Groot situation on our hands. We got a different Groot because the Groot you're used to seeing is packed away because we're moving to New York City. We're moving back to New York. It's very exciting. But in the meantime, got to watch another great movie with you. So let's talk about it. We watched a Western. Hello. I don't know about you, but I like Westerns. I like them. I haven't seen all the good ones, but I've seen a bunch that I like a whole lot. Big fan of the Sergio Leone ones. We watched Once Upon a Time in the West. Is that what that movie's called? Yes. We watched that Once Upon a Time here. Big fan of like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, High Noon, Others. But we watched one that is highly regarded as like one of the best ones ever. And it's actually kind of a later Western for when the genre was most popular. The guy who directed this movie is a fella named John Ford, who is probably a Mount Rushmore Hollywood director, honestly. He made a lot of good movies. He made The Searchers, which is one of the best movies of all time. He made Stagecoach. Basically, this guy worked with John Wayne a lot, and this movie is no exception. This movie is starring John Wayne with Jimmy Stewart. And if you check the poster, one of the big selling points of this movie was it was the first time that those two actors were teaming up together. They were also both in their 50s when they made this movie. So yeah, Jimmy Stewart plays a young lawyer who just finished law school, and John Wayne plays a young man as well, I guess. There's even another 50-year-old guy in this movie who plays a teenager. Long story short, back in the day, nobody gave a shit about how you looked on screen, I guess, because it didn't matter that these fellas had a bunch of wrinkles on their faces. It didn't. It really didn't. And the fact that it was shot in black and white actually kind of helped that fact. This movie came out in 1962, which is a nice thing to know because color film was hugely popular at the time. John Ford himself had made some of the better looking color films. And this one was shot in black and white. Also not filmed in John Ford's famous location of Monument Valley, which you would definitely recognize if you saw it, if you don't think you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, this film was shot on the back lot in black and white, apparently because Paramount was cutting costs. And hey, maybe that's true. Maybe it's also true that if you shot it in color, no one would believe that Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne were playing these younger men. No matter how you slice it, it's a beautiful piece of black and white cinematography and an incredible story, to be honest. It plays out very much like a piece of theater. I do believe there's actually a play version of this movie. Google it. I don't know if that's entirely true. Might be true. Anyway, 1962. A year before Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. That'll come up in a sec. In the meantime, let's cover some good facts. This movie is very well reviewed. Has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. This movie is very well loved in the Letterboxd community because it's number 200 on their 250 best movies ever. So it is highly regarded as like one of the best movies ever, one of the best Westerns ever. And this is also the film that attributes the famous John Wayne impersonation of saying, "Hey, Pilgrim." Not the best John Wayne, but this notion of calling people Pilgrim is just what John Wayne calls Jimmy Stewart in this movie the whole time. He's always calling him Pilgrim and lighting matches off of shit. John Wayne lights matches off of shit like nobody else. Off of the bottom of a boot, off the side of a wall. It doesn't matter. My man is always lighting matches off of shit. But yeah, this movie's really good, you guys. When it started, first of all, I'm going to get into some spoilers. And one of the things that I think benefited me watching this movie was not knowing certain things. So if you want to watch this movie and you don't want to know the spoilers, watch out. Anyway, this movie kind of starts out at the end. I was sitting and started this movie and I was like, wow, even the music, like every single thing about this feels like I just missed the whole movie. It's like, oh shit, did I come in at the end of this movie? What happened? But it's a very clever way of using the story where, yeah, we literally start the movie at the very end of the story. And we find out that Jimmy Stewart is back in town in Shinbone. Great fucking name for a Western town. Anyway, he's back. He's a senator. He's a U.S. senator. He's back in town with his wife for a friend's funeral. We don't know who this friend is. We don't know. We just know that this very important fella just rolled into this little town. He used to be here a lot back in the day, and now he's here for some funeral, mystery funeral. Guy from the newspaper, very interested in why Senator Stoddard would be back in Shinbone. So they're all sad around this coffin, and we don't know who's inside. And the newspaper guy comes in, and he's like, bro, having a senator in town is news. I gotta know why you're here. You gotta tell me. And he's like, well, I'm here for a friend's funeral. Yeah, well, this is a small town. I don't know who died. Who even died? What are you doing here? And he tells him, Tom Donovan. And there's confusion among the newspaper people. Like, they don't know who that is. To which then Senator Stoddard, Jimmy Stewart, sits down and tells these gentlemen, this is why I'm here for Tom Donovan's funeral. This is what this man means to me. Flashback. And then the whole movie happens. But the way that first little 5-10 minutes unfolds, really just, I was really struck by the courage to be like, I'm showing you the end of the movie, like the emotional ending of the movie at the very beginning. And I thought it was very cool. But yeah, once we do go back in time and we were introduced to everybody, Jimmy Stewart plays this like idealist, man of the law. He's trying to bring law to the West. It's still a pretty lawless place because you got Liberty Valance running around. Liberty Valance, played by Lee Marvin, and he's fucking awesome, even though he's got the stupidest outfit. If I saw him today and he was talking all that shit, dressed up like Jesse from Toy Story 2, I would have smacked him. But he would have shot me, and I would have learned my lesson in the afterlife. But yeah, Lee Marvin is great as Liberty Valance, the big bad gangster outlaw who him and his two cronies, one of which was Lee Van Cleef. Shout out to Lee Van Cleef, who has maybe one line in this movie, but he's the villain in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah, this little gang of fools is basically terrorizing Shinbone. And John Wayne plays Tom Donovan. We find that out, and we're like, oh shit, okay. We're going to find out how these two became friends. We're going to find out what the hell happened and why they're so sad that he's dead. And I'm just going to kind of cut to the chase. I don't need to recount the entire film for you. But just know that it's basically the whole movie comes down to, is the Old West going to win out, or is the future forward United States of America governed by the Constitution going to make its way out here to the frontier? And are we going to kind of industrialize the West? That's like the main conundrum, if you will, of the whole piece. I gotta say, this movie's kind of a cool like PSA for democracy, education, and reading. There's a whole sequence where there's a character who doesn't know how to read. And so then Jimmy Stewart takes it upon himself to teach her how to read. And in doing that, he winds up with a classroom full of people, adults and children alike, that want to learn how to read. And he's teaching them how to read, including Pompey, which is John Wayne's kind of best friend, sidekick, worker guy. And Pompey's played by Woody Strode. Shout out to Woody Strode. There's in this scene, I mentioned this movie came out a year before the I Had a Dream speech, and that's on purpose because in this scene, Jimmy Stewart, he's like, Pompey, why don't you read for us, or recite for us, rather, the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. And Pompey starts to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and he gets a little lost. And Jimmy Stewart takes a second and says that all men are created equal. That all men are created equal. And I thought it was very, very cool of John Ford to frame this scene in this Western at the time of the Civil Rights Movement. So it was just I thought it was a very cleverly and yet very pointed piece to include in this movie, where so much emphasis is put on the power of the vote, the power of the people, and the power of democracy. And there's even a whole section towards the end of this film that involves a vote, because, like I said, my homie Jimmy Stewart is now Senator Stoddard, and we got to find out how that happened. So we do. I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit at the end of this movie. So here's the official kind of spoilery section. So, you know, shut up if you don't want to know what's up. The man who shot Liberty Valance was Jimmy Stewart. We see the whole thing play out. It's a whole showdown in the middle of the street at night where everybody thinks Jimmy Stewart should run away. He doesn't. He stays, and he has this shootout with Liberty Valance where he shoots him. Mind you, one of the things we know about not Senator yet, Jimmy Stewart, is that he's a terrible shot. There's a great scene where John Wayne is teaching him how to shoot, and he's just a terrible shot. But in this showdown, boom, takes him out in one shot, kills Liberty Valance. And so everybody's like, yo, the guy who says he's a lawyer who's trying to bring the law to the West is also kind of a badass. But then it's, of course, used against him on the other side where they're like, he's a murderer. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You find out at the end of this movie that he is not the man who shot Liberty Valance. My boy Tom Donovan was waiting in the shadows with a rifle because he knew that Liberty Valance was going to put this dude down. And so at the same moment that Stoddard takes that shot, my man Tom Donovan also, boom, takes a shot, and he's actually the one who puts Liberty Valance down, which in like the code of the West is not cool. You can't just be straight up murdering people. It's got to be like a shootout where like no matter who dies, it was in self-defense or whatever. But so Jimmy Stewart's character kind of lives with this secret that he is the man who's been attributed with like cleaning up the West and getting rid of Liberty Valance, when really it was Tom all along who was the man who saved his life that night. And Tom just sort of kind of falls to the background and becomes like a town drunk that we remember from the first scene. Nobody even knows who he is. He's like the drunk guy. So like if he died, it's like, oh, a homeless guy died? I don't know who you're talking about. Which is so sad. But there's this great moment right at the very end where we're on the train back to DC, and Stoddard tells his wife, who I didn't really talk about her very much. She's a very big part of this movie, where he tells her, like, I think we should move back to Shinbone. You know, I want to kind of come back here. And there's this brief little moment where I forget even who it is, but they're like, anything for the man who shot Liberty Valance. And we now know the truth. And there's this great bit where he's wearing a hat and he strikes a match off of his boot and he goes to light his pipe. And it's interesting because there's a scene earlier where he mentions that like we don't smoke. And so now seeing him like smoking very openly and striking the match, it's like, oh, it's your buddy Tom Donovan really molded who you wound up becoming. And it was just like a very nice touch, I thought. And I don't know if it was John Ford or Jimmy Stewart who came up with that idea, but it was great. Anyway, talked a lot about Man of Liberty Valance, the guy who shot him. It's a great movie. I recommend watching it. It's all spoiled for you now if you watched all of this. But yeah, John Ford, watch any of his movies, really. You can watch what? Did he do Of Mice and Men? No, he did Grapes of Wrath. Did a bunch of good shit. Watch his movies. Anyway, we're going to have a new pick for you, so be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, hit me up if you got any comments on what you thought of this movie or if there are movies that you'd like us to watch in this club. And that's it. That's all I got for you. So enjoy yourself. Have a good weekend. And be on the lookout for the next pick. See you, Pilgrim.